In a world where we often face challenging situations that test our patience, judgment, and composure, mastering psychological techniques to handle these situations effectively can be incredibly empowering. Controlling a situation doesn't necessarily mean manipulating people. Instead, it involves understanding the dynamics of human behavior, anticipating reactions, and responding with clarity and insight. It means knowing how to influence interactions in a way that brings about the best possible outcome for everyone involved. Ancient philosophers like Epictetus, Laozi, and even more modern thinkers like Viktor Frankl have shown us how psychological strategies rooted in timeless philosophies can help us remain calm, composed, and in control. The techniques we'll be exploring today derive from these philosophies, integrating methods to help you build emotional resilience, cultivate awareness, and develop the ability to control various situations with grace and wisdom. Throughout this video, we'll dive into 11 powerful psychological techniques. These techniques draw from Stoicism, Taoism, Existentialism, Humanistic Psychology, and even Buddhist teachings, all of which can help you gain the upper hand in difficult interactions. But remember, these aren't tricks to manipulate or deceive others. Instead, they are tools for cultivating a strong, grounded self that can handle whatever comes its way with integrity and intention. Not only will we discuss how to implement these techniques in daily life, but we'll also talk about how to recognize when someone else might be using them. This awareness can provide you with a level of insight that prevents you from being swayed or controlled by others and allows you to remain centered in any situation. Let's dive into these techniques, starting with one of the most foundational aspects of control and influence: emotional regulation through Stoicism. Now, if you are new here, please like the video and subscribe. Statistics show that only 15% of my audience is subscribed to the channel, so if this content has helped you in any way, I ask you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. 1. Emotional regulation through Stoicism. The ability to manage and regulate your emotions is essential when it comes to influencing any situation. Emotions often act as internal guides, showing us what matters, but they can also cloud our judgment, especially when we're under pressure. The Stoics understood this all too well. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, taught that people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. What does this mean? Essentially, it's not the situations themselves that provoke emotional reactions, but rather our interpretations of those situations. In today's world, emotional regulation is more valuable than ever. Constant connectivity and the speed at which information flows often mean that we're bombarded by stimuli that trigger emotional responses. Practicing emotional regulation, as the Stoics did, allows you to remain calm and composed no matter what happens around you. This technique is especially useful in high-stress situations, like a confrontation at work or a difficult conversation with a loved one. Emotional regulation through Stoicism involves a few key practices: premeditation of adversity, reframing, and focusing on what you can control. The Stoics believed in a technique called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This practice involves mentally preparing yourself for possible challenges before they happen. For example, if you have an important meeting or conversation coming up, you might take a few moments to imagine potential outcomes, both good and bad. By acknowledging these scenarios, you're less likely to be surprised or overwhelmed if things don't go as planned. Another core element is reframing. When something goes wrong, a Stoic asks themselves, how can I view this situation in a way that's constructive? Imagine you're caught in heavy traffic on the way to an important event. Instead of allowing frustration to build, You could reframe the situation as an opportunity to practice patience or catch up on an inspiring audiobook. By actively choosing a new perspective, you control how you experience the situation, thus maintaining emotional equilibrium. Finally, there's the principle of controlling what you can and letting go of the rest. The Stoics taught that the only things we truly control are our own actions, thoughts, and responses. Everything else, whether it's another person's reaction, the weather, or unexpected delays, is beyond our control. By focusing solely on what you can influence, you conserve your energy and remain resilient, even in the face of difficulties. Emotional regulation is incredibly versatile and can be applied in nearly any situation. In professional settings, it's particularly useful during high-stakes meetings, presentations, or negotiations, where staying calm and collected can give you a strategic advantage. For instance, in a negotiation, the more composed you are, the more likely you'll be to listen actively, think critically, and respond effectively. It's equally valuable in personal relationships, where emotions often run high. If you're having a heated discussion with a partner, practicing emotional regulation can help you keep the conversation constructive rather than reactive. By keeping your emotions in check, you're more likely to communicate with empathy and find common ground. Now, it's not just about using this technique yourself. It's also essential to recognize when someone else is using it. If you notice that someone remains exceptionally calm in a stressful situation or appears unfazed by external chaos, it could be a sign they're practicing emotional regulation. Another clue is if they're quick to reframe setbacks or see them as opportunities. When you observe someone who doesn't easily react or get flustered, they're likely applying Stoic principles to control the situation. 2. The power of silence, from Taoism. Silence is often underrated in a culture that celebrates constant communication and instant responses. Yet, silence can be a profound tool for influence and control. Taoism, an ancient Chinese philosophy, teaches that true power often lies not in action, but in non-action, a concept known as Wu Wei. Taoist sages like Laozi emphasize that silence has the potential to create space, inviting others to reveal more than they might otherwise. By practicing silence, you allow conversations to develop organically, giving you the opportunity to observe and assess. When you refrain from speaking, you invite the other person to fill the void, often leading them to disclose information they might not have shared otherwise. This technique can also disarm people, as many individuals are uncomfortable with silence and feel compelled to talk, revealing thoughts or emotions they would typically keep guarded. The power of silence works through psychological discomfort and the natural human tendency to fill gaps in conversation. Imagine you're in a job interview, and after the interviewer has asked a question, you respond concisely and then remain silent. Instead of nervously adding more to your answer, you hold eye contact and stay composed. The silence might prompt the interviewer to reveal additional information about the role, the team dynamics, or even share their thoughts on your suitability for the position. In other words, silence grants you the advantage of patience. While others scramble to fill the empty space, you remain composed and attentive, gathering insights that can inform your next move. Another aspect of silence is that it signals confidence. When you're comfortable with silence, you show that you don't need to prove yourself through words alone. This can be incredibly powerful in establishing authority and respect. The power of silence is particularly effective in situations where you want to observe and gather information. It's useful during negotiations, where silence can compel the other party to rethink their position or offer additional concessions. For instance, if you're negotiating a salary and your employer offers a figure, you might respond with a polite, "I see," followed by silence. In many cases, this will prompt them to clarify or even increase their offer, as they feel compelled to fill the quiet with a better response. This technique is also effective in tense conversations, whether with colleagues, family members, or friends. Instead of reacting immediately to a critical comment or heated question, try pausing. The silence allows you to gather your thoughts, and it often makes the other person reflect on what they've said. This can lead to more productive discussions and fewer misunderstandings. If someone is using silence against you, you may feel a subtle pressure to keep talking or justify yourself. Be mindful if someone remains silent after you've shared your opinion or made a statement. They may be creating space to see how much more you'll reveal. It can be helpful to recognize this tactic so you don't inadvertently disclose more than intended. When you sense someone is using silence strategically, remember to stay composed and avoid filling the silence unless you're ready to share thoughtfully. 3. Reflective listening. Reflective listening is a technique often associated with humanistic psychology, particularly in the work of Carl Rogers, one of the founders of the approach. This technique involves truly understanding and empathizing with the other person's perspective, which can establish a deep level of trust and influence. Reflective listening isn't just about passively hearing words. It's about actively engaging, processing, and feeding back what you've understood. When someone feels deeply understood, they are more likely to open up, consider your point of view, and even be influenced by your suggestions. By reflecting back what they've said, you signal that you're invested in the conversation and that their feelings matter. This can be especially effective in conflict resolution, as it helps diffuse tension and brings emotional clarity to the interaction. Reflective listening works through a process of validation and clarification. By restating what the other person has said, you provide them with an opportunity to correct, expand, or affirm their feelings. For example, if someone says, "I've been feeling overwhelmed with work lately," a reflective listener might respond, "It sounds like you're dealing with a lot of stress at work, and it's starting to feel unmanageable." This simple reflection can make the other person feel seen and understood, encouraging them to share even more. In essence, reflective listening works as a mirror. It reflects the other person's words and emotions back to them, which helps them feel validated and respected. This can be particularly impactful in situations where emotions are running high, as reflective listening has the power to de-escalate and calm. It's also an invaluable tool for building rapport and establishing a sense of mutual understanding. Reflective listening is invaluable in both personal and professional settings. In personal relationships, it can be used during difficult conversations to show empathy and understanding. For example, if a friend is upset about a breakup, reflective listening can help them feel heard without the need for you to offer unsolicited advice. By simply acknowledging their feelings, you provide a safe space for them to process their emotions. Professionally, reflective listening is particularly useful in leadership and customer service roles. When a colleague or client expresses frustration, responding with reflective listening can transform the interaction from adversarial to cooperative. Suppose a client says, "I'm really unhappy with the product because it didn't meet my expectations." Instead of reacting defensively, a reflective listener might respond, "I understand that the product didn't meet your expectations. It sounds like there were specific features you were hoping for that weren't there." This acknowledgement can diffuse the situation and create an opening for constructive dialogue. If someone is using reflective listening on you, you may notice that they frequently restate or paraphrase your words. This is generally a positive thing, as it shows they're engaged and empathetic. However, If you suspect someone is using reflective listening manipulatively, be cautious if they're subtly steering the conversation in a specific direction. They may be trying to encourage you to reveal more, or they might be framing your words in a way that aligns with their agenda. Recognizing reflective listening can help you maintain control over what you choose to share. 4. The power of reframing, cognitive psychology. Reframing is a psychological technique grounded in cognitive psychology that involves changing the way you view a situation, thereby altering its meaning. By shifting perspective, you can transform how you feel about and respond to a given scenario. This is a valuable skill because our emotions often follow our interpretations. When we're able to reframe a situation, we can control our emotional response and steer the outcome in a more favorable direction. Reframing can be used in various situations to reduce stress, increase resilience, and maintain control. It's particularly useful when faced with challenges or setbacks that initially seem negative. For example, imagine you're assigned an overwhelming project at work. Instead of viewing it as an impossible burden, you might reframe it as an opportunity to demonstrate your abilities and learn new skills. This perspective not only changes your emotional response, but also motivates you to tackle the project with a proactive attitude. The power of reframing lies in the concept of cognitive restructuring. Cognitive psychology teaches us that our thoughts influence our emotions, which in turn affect our behaviors. By changing the narrative we attach to a particular event, we change our emotional reaction to it. This is the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which helps individuals identify and alter distorted thinking patterns. For instance, if you make a mistake during a presentation, you might initially think, "I'm a failure. I can't do anything right." This thought can lead to feelings of shame and incompetence. However, by reframing, you can shift to a different perspective. This was a learning experience that will make my next presentation even stronger. This new interpretation generates feelings of growth and resilience, allowing you to move forward constructively. Reframing is particularly useful in situations where you're experiencing negative emotions that could hinder your ability to perform. In high-stress environments, such as during exams, job interviews, or public speaking, reframing can help alleviate anxiety. By viewing these events as opportunities for personal growth, rather than tests of your worth, you empower yourself to approach them with a positive mindset. It's also effective in interpersonal conflicts. If someone criticizes your work, instead of feeling attacked, you might reframe it as a chance to gain constructive feedback and improve. Reframing can shift the dynamic from adversarial to collaborative, allowing you to maintain a sense of control and professionalism. When someone is reframing against you, they may attempt to put a positive spin on a negative situation, possibly to downplay its significance or encourage you to see things their way. For example, if a colleague tries to reframe an increased workload by saying, "Think of it as a way to show the team what you're capable of," they may be trying to get you to accept the situation more readily. While reframing can be genuinely supportive, it's essential to recognize when someone might be using it to sway your perception for their benefit. 5. Anchoring, behavioral psychology. Anchoring is a psychological technique based on the principle that people tend to rely heavily on the first piece of information they receive, the anchor, when making decisions. This concept is often used in behavioral psychology and is frequently applied in negotiations, marketing, and interpersonal persuasion. When you anchor a conversation or situation with a specific point, you effectively influence the frame of reference for the discussion, guiding others toward a conclusion that aligns with your goals. For example, when making a salary proposal, an employee might start by stating a high number. This high number serves as the anchor, influencing the employer's perception and making a slightly lower, more reasonable number seem like a compromise, even though it may still be higher than the employer originally intended to offer. Anchoring takes advantage of a cognitive bias where individuals give disproportionate weight to the first piece of information presented to them. This initial number or idea creates a reference point which subtly shapes how all subsequent information is interpreted. Even if new evidence contradicts the anchor, people often unconsciously adjust their views around it. Anchoring can also be applied to guide someone's perception in non-monetary situations. For instance, in a conversation, you might start by mentioning a significant positive detail about your work on a project. This creates an anchor that positions you as capable and diligent, which can influence how the other person perceives the rest of the information you share. Anchoring is highly effective in any negotiation scenario, such as salary discussions, contract agreements, or even day-to-day transactions. If you're negotiating the price of a car, you might begin by referencing a high-end model with specific features. This sets a high anchor, making the car you're actually interested in appear more affordable by comparison. Anchoring helps set the tone and makes your desired outcome seem more reasonable. It can also be useful in team meetings or collaborative projects. By anchoring the discussion around a specific goal or expectation, you guide the team's focus, ensuring everyone's ideas and contributions align with the intended outcome. This approach keeps the conversation productive and centered on shared objectives. If you notice someone leading a conversation with an unusually high or low number, they're likely setting an anchor. In these situations, take a step back and consider whether that initial figure is realistic or whether it might be skewing your perception. If a colleague begins a project discussion by mentioning an exceedingly high budget, they could be anchoring the conversation to make their preferred, slightly lower budget seem more reasonable. Being aware of anchors can help you question the validity of the information presented and form your own objective conclusions. You have now reached the halfway mark of the video. I congratulate you for trying to become a better version of yourself, and I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. 6. The Disarming Technique, Nonviolent Communication. The disarming technique, derived from nonviolent communication, NVC, is about finding a kernel of truth in the other person's perspective, even if you disagree with them. By validating their feelings or perspective, you diffuse tension, foster empathy, and create a collaborative atmosphere. This technique is particularly effective when you're faced with criticism or when you need to de-escalate a confrontation. For example, if someone accuses you of not listening, instead of getting defensive, you might respond by saying, "I can see how it felt that way, and I'm sorry. I want to understand your concerns better." This response acknowledges their feelings and opens the door to a constructive conversation rather than a heated argument. The disarming technique works by addressing the emotional needs behind the other person's statements. Many arguments escalate because people feel that their emotions are being dismissed or invalidated. When you acknowledge the other person's perspective, even if it's only in part, you show that you respect their feelings and take them seriously. This technique draws on the psychological principle of validation. Validation doesn't mean you agree with everything they're saying. It simply means that you recognize their right to feel the way they do. By doing this, you lower the defenses and create a space where both parties can communicate more openly. The disarming technique is particularly useful in conflict resolution, whether in the workplace or in personal relationships. If a co-worker feels you didn't contribute enough to a project, instead of arguing, you could say, "I understand that it seemed like I wasn't as involved, and I apologize if it came across that way. I'm committed to making sure our work is balanced in the future." This acknowledgement makes the co-worker feel heard and respected, setting the stage for a more productive discussion. You can also use this technique in customer service interactions. When dealing with a frustrated client, acknowledging their concerns first can turn the conversation in a positive direction. For example, if a customer is angry about a delayed delivery, you might say, "I completely understand why you're upset, and I would feel the same way. Let's see what we can do to make this right." When someone is using the disarming technique on you, they may initially agree with part of your argument or validate your feelings, even if they hold an opposing view. This is often a sign that they're trying to defuse the situation and encourage a more cooperative dialogue. While this technique is usually well-intentioned, be aware that it can also be used strategically to redirect the conversation. If you sense someone validating your feelings while gently steering you in a different direction, they may be using this technique to establish rapport before presenting their own perspective. 7. Mirroring, rapport-building technique. Mirroring is a subtle but powerful rapport-building technique that involves mimicking the other person's body language, tone of voice, or verbal style. This technique, rooted in the psychological concept of rapport, is often used unconsciously in social interactions. However, when done intentionally, mirroring can create a sense of connection and trust, making the other person feel more comfortable and receptive to your ideas. For instance, if the person you're speaking to crosses their arms, you might casually do the same a few moments later. This subtle mimicry can make them feel that you're on the same wavelength. In conversations, mirroring can be as simple as repeating back key phrases they use or adjusting your tone to match theirs. Mirroring works on a subconscious level, tapping into a concept known as the chameleon effect. People naturally like those who are similar to them, and mirroring creates a sense of similarity. When you match someone's body language or speaking style, you signal to them that you're attuned to their state of mind. This can create a sense of rapport and foster trust, as people often interpret these subtle cues as signs of empathy and understanding. Mirroring also activates mirror neurons in the brain, which are associated with empathy. When someone sees you reflecting their behavior, they may feel a stronger emotional connection to you, as their brain interprets this as a shared experience. Mirroring is particularly effective in situations where building rapport is essential, such as job interviews, sales meetings, or first dates. In a job interview, subtly mirroring the interviewer's posture or tone can create a sense of familiarity and ease, making you appear more likable. In sales, mirroring the client's speaking style can make them feel more understood, increasing the likelihood of a successful transaction. In personal relationships, mirroring can enhance connection and intimacy. When engaging in a serious conversation with a friend or partner, mirroring their tone and gestures can convey that you're fully engaged and emotionally aligned with them. If you notice someone adopting similar body language, tone, or phrasing as you, they may be consciously or unconsciously mirroring you. While mirroring is generally a sign of rapport, it can also be used strategically to influence you. If someone is mirroring you too closely or seems to be copying your actions in an unnatural way, they may be attempting to build rapport quickly to gain your trust. Recognizing mirroring can help you remain aware of how it influences your perception of the other person. 8. Tactical empathy, emotional intelligence. Tactical empathy is a technique that involves actively understanding and acknowledging another person's feelings and perspectives, not to agree, but to gain insight into their motivations. This technique, often used in negotiation and conflict resolution, is a core component of emotional intelligence. Tactical empathy goes beyond simply listening. It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and considering their emotional state to guide the conversation more effectively. For example, in a negotiation, you might say, "I understand that budget constraints are a big concern for you right now." This statement shows the other party that you're aware of their position, creating a foundation for a more cooperative dialogue. Tactical empathy works by validating the other person's emotions, which helps them feel understood and respected. When people feel acknowledged, they're often more open to discussion and compromise. This technique is grounded in the psychology of emotional validation, where recognizing someone's feelings reduces their need to defend their position and opens the door to influence. This approach draws on the principles of emotional intelligence, particularly empathy and social awareness. By demonstrating that you understand the other person's perspective, you encourage them to be more receptive to your ideas. Tactical empathy also fosters trust, as it shows you're genuinely interested in their viewpoint, not just focused on your own agenda. Tactical empathy is valuable in negotiation, mediation, and conflict resolution. If you're negotiating a deal, acknowledging the other party's concerns can lead to a more productive outcome. For example, if a client expresses frustration about a project timeline, you might respond by saying, "I understand that timing is crucial for you. Let's discuss how we can align the schedule with your needs." This empathy creates a sense of partnership, allowing both parties to work toward a mutually beneficial solution. This technique is also useful in personal relationships. If a friend is upset about a decision you made, showing tactical empathy can help you diffuse the situation. By saying, "I see that this decision has affected you, and I want to understand your perspective," you demonstrate that you value their feelings and are open to constructive dialogue. When someone uses tactical empathy on you, they'll likely make statements that acknowledge and validate your feelings, even if they don't necessarily agree with your perspective. This can be positive, as it often leads to more meaningful conversations. However, if someone is repeatedly validating your emotions in a way that feels insincere, they may be using tactical empathy to gain your trust or to steer the conversation. Recognizing tactical empathy can help you gauge the other person's intentions and decide whether to open up fully or remain cautious. 9. Silence and pausing. Stoicism. Silence and strategic pausing is a tactic rooted in Stoic philosophy. Stoicism teaches us that silence is a tool for control. When you pause before responding, you give yourself a chance to consider your words carefully, ensuring they align with your goals. Pausing not only creates a sense of authority and calm, but it also allows you to remain composed, preventing emotions from dictating your response. In moments of conflict or intense discussions, silence can serve as a power move, signaling that you are unfazed and thoughtful. For instance, in a heated discussion, instead of responding immediately to a provocative statement, taking a moment of silence allows the other person's words to linger, often causing them to second-guess themselves. Pausing briefly before responding to a question can also make you appear more thoughtful and measured, which can build your credibility. Silence and pausing work by creating a sense of anticipation and encouraging the other person to fill the quiet with their thoughts or justifications. This is especially useful in situations where you want the other person to reveal more information. The psychology behind this technique is based on the discomfort people often feel when faced with silence. By remaining quiet, you signal that you're in control, and others will often interpret your silence as wisdom, strength, or even mystery. In Stoicism, silence serves another purpose. It allows you to avoid speaking impulsively, which can lead to regret or emotional turmoil. The Stoics believed in measured, intentional speech as a means of maintaining control over one's emotions and actions. By practicing silence, you create a buffer that prevents you from reacting emotionally, giving you the chance to respond thoughtfully. This technique is particularly effective in high-stakes meetings, interviews, and negotiations. If you're asked a tough question, take a pause before responding. This not only gives you time to formulate a thoughtful answer, but also signals that you're composed and confident. Silence is also powerful when dealing with people who try to provoke you emotionally. By refusing to react immediately, you avoid being drawn into their emotional agenda and maintain control over the interaction. You can also use silence in personal relationships when discussing sensitive topics. Instead of jumping in to defend yourself, pause after the other person speaks. This shows that you're listening and allows you to consider your response carefully. Silence can help diffuse tension and create a calmer, more respectful dialogue. When someone uses silence against you, they might remain quiet after you've spoken, compelling you to fill the silence. If you find yourself talking more than usual to break the quiet, they may be using this technique to gather more information or observe your reactions. Recognizing this can help you maintain control by staying comfortable with the silence and not feeling pressured to continue talking. Do so. 10. The contrast principle. Persuasion psychology. The contrast principle is a persuasion technique grounded in the psychological principle that people tend to make decisions based on relative comparisons rather than absolute values. This technique is often used in sales and negotiations, where the presentation of contrasting options can influence people's choices. By presenting two or more options, one of which is less desirable, you make the option you actually prefer seem more attractive by comparison. For instance, if you're negotiating a salary, you might start by mentioning a high-end offer from another company. By comparison, your current offer may then seem more reasonable, even if it's higher than initially expected. Similarly, if you're trying to persuade someone to make a decision, presenting a less favorable alternative first can make your preferred choice seem much more appealing. The contrast principle leverages the psychology of decision-making by presenting options in a specific sequence. When faced with a less favorable option first, people are more likely to view the following option as better by contrast, even if they would have considered it mediocre in isolation. This technique is based on perceptual bias, where people's evaluations are influenced by comparisons with surrounding stimuli. In negotiations, the contrast principle works by creating a reference point, or anchor, that makes the next option seem preferable. For example, if you're selling a service, you might present a high-priced package first. Once the customer sees the cost of the premium option, the more reasonably priced option will appear more affordable, increasing the likelihood of a sale. The contrast principle is highly effective in sales, negotiations, and any situation where you need to persuade someone to make a choice. In a business setting, if you're proposing a project budget, you might initially present a higher cost option with more features. Afterward, when you show a more affordable option with fewer features, it seems like a compromise, increasing the chances that your preferred budget will be approved. This technique is also useful in personal scenarios. If you're planning a vacation with friends, you might first suggest an expensive destination before presenting a more affordable but equally enjoyable option. By comparison, the second choice seems like a better value, making it more likely that your friends will agree to it. When someone presents you with an option that seems outrageously high or low before offering a more moderate alternative, they may be using the contrast principle to make the second choice appear more favorable. By being aware of this, you can evaluate each option objectively and avoid being swayed by comparisons. Take a moment to assess whether the second option is truly reasonable or simply appears so because of the contrast. Bevertandas 11. The illusion of choice. Influence psychology. The illusion of choice is a psychological tactic that involves giving people the perception of freedom by presenting them with multiple options, all of which lead to the same outcome. This technique is commonly used in sales, negotiations, and management, where it's essential to guide someone toward a particular decision without making them feel coerced. By offering a range of choices, you allow people to feel in control, even though all options align with your desired outcome. For example, if you're a manager assigning a task, you might say, "Would you prefer to start on the report today or tomorrow?" While the employee feels they have a choice, both options achieve your objective of having the report completed on time. This technique ensures cooperation by providing a sense of autonomy, even within predetermined boundaries. The illusion of choice works by creating the appearance of freedom, which is often enough to satisfy people's need for control. Humans have an inherent desire for autonomy, and when given a choice, they feel more invested in the decision-making process. This technique relies on the psychological concept of the choice paradox, where the simple act of choosing can create satisfaction, even if the choices are limited or lead to the same result. By framing a situation with two or more options, you allow the other person to make a decision within parameters that serve your interests. This approach is particularly effective in maintaining positive relationships, as it reduces resistance by fostering a sense of empowerment. The illusion of choice is useful in situations where you want to guide someone's decision subtly. In a customer service role, you might ask, "Would you like to renew for 6 months or a full year?" This approach makes it more likely that the customer will choose one of the options, even if they initially had doubts about renewing at all. This technique also works well in parenting and teaching. For example, if you want a child to finish their homework, you might say, "Do you want to do your math homework first or your reading homework?" By providing options, you avoid outright resistance and increase the likelihood that the child will comply with one of the choices. If you notice that someone is offering you a series of choices, but each one leads to the same end, they may be using the illusion of choice. Take a moment to consider whether there are other options that haven't been presented. If you feel boxed in, try to expand the conversation by suggesting an alternative that aligns with your preferences, or ask whether there's flexibility beyond the given choices. Incorporating these 11 psychological techniques, grounded in both philosophy and behavioral science, into your interactions empowers you to influence situations with subtlety and confidence. Whether you're using reframing to shift perspectives, anchoring to guide negotiations, or leveraging silence to create authority, each of these techniques enhances your ability to navigate conversations, conflicts, and collaborations. Understanding these techniques also enables you to recognize when others may be using them to influence you. By staying mindful of the cues, such as strategic mirroring, the use of tactical empathy, or the illusion of choice, you can maintain your sense of autonomy and respond from a position of strength. These psychology-based techniques are more than just strategies. They represent a philosophy of mindful interaction. When used with integrity and awareness, they enable you to build deeper connections, foster respect, and achieve outcomes that benefit all parties involved. By mastering these methods, you not only enhance your influence, but also cultivate a greater understanding of human behavior, which is essential for personal and professional success. As you apply these insights in your daily life, remember that true mastery comes with practice and reflection. Consider which techniques resonate most with your style and objectives, and begin incorporating them one at a time. Over time, you'll find that these skills become second nature, allowing you to navigate complex situations with poise, purpose, and a profound understanding of the art of influence. Thank you for joining this exploration of psychology and philosophy in action. Be sure to reflect on these techniques and notice how they shape your interactions. And remember, the most powerful influence is often the one that feels most natural. So use these tools not just to control situations, but to foster meaningful, respectful relationships wherever you go. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos.